thank you for the invitation. So just by way of background, I'm the ex-police, so retired police officer who, in my latter years of policing, was in charge of the kind of national cybercrime capability, but persuaded to retire for the pension and join government to develop its capability around about cyber resilience, as we refer to it. So for the last 5 years, we in government have been working, and Scottish Government have been working in collaboration with key partners to deliver safe, secure and prosperous, which is Scotland's cyber resilience strategy. And to drive that, there's been a number of action plans, 5 spanning public-private third, along with a learning and skills plan, because it's really key, and then driving towards the economic opportunities that Scotland can gain from developing its skill sets on cybersecurity. And what we've been trying to do in the last 5 years is create the right conditions from a cyber perspective for Scotland to flourish and grow in a digital age. Because there's one thing, being this ex-policeman, so one thing is absolutely for sure, cyber crime, criminals have evolved at pace to take advantage of the digital world, and they are unbarred by legislation and geography. They are onto the newest technologies before we even understand them. They exploited Bitcoin, they exploited IoT and blockchain before few of us even understood what they were, and some of us still don't understand that much about them. And they really, the world is now their workplace. And like most of us just now, working from home is something they can do very, very well because they can reach every part of the world. But they exploit 2 things, essentially. They take advantage of the technology that we just use and trust, because it does what it says in the tin. And behind that, it's actually rather complex. So they take advantage of the vulnerabilities in technology, which is either poor coding or often misconfiguration, just not fitted in properly. Or they take advantage of users, and that's us, individuals, and the users of the technology. And both are vulnerable to being exploited by cybercrime. And they have all the tools available to them to actually be pretty sophisticated in how they do it. So the con man of old has a new bag of tricks, and digital enables them in every way that enables enlightened businesses. So they take great advantage of that. And the human element, and if we stay away from the technical element, is the one that actually still enables them to do their work in the vast majority of untargeted attacks. Like vampires, they often take the easy route and ask you to invite them in. Often it is through phishing, and we'll hear more from others about the consequences of that. But it's when they get in to take the advantage that the real trouble can start. And of course, there is no single definition of what a cyber criminal is, because they are a vast array of individuals with intent and skills. Often it's driven by financial gain, but more than that for many. So it's all about gaining some form of advantage using us and the technology we use. And therefore, we must be alive to that risk. And whilst many are really consider cyber as a techie thing, something for somebody else to worry about, actually the reality in a digital age is cyber is just a business risk. The very same way as financial is a business risk, and it needs to be treated like that as a business risk that has technical elements. And that's a very important thing going forward. And it's very important for business continuity to think, when we start talking about cyber risk and cyber incident response, to think of the impact on the business and how that relates to them, because this doesn't belong to somebody else. It belongs to everybody. So it's a business risk, and it should be treated that way. But in order for an organization to manage a risk, it actually has to be able to describe it, doesn't it? So you can't assess the likelihood and impact of a risk unless you can describe aspects to that risk. So you need to know something about the nature of risk. And for those who say, well, it's never happened to me and it probably won't, and I've heard about it, but I'm fine. Actually, the vast majority of attacks are not targeted, and it's either your luck or your bad luck because so much is random. And it's things often outside your own hands that cause it to come to your door. But when it comes, you will feel it, and we're going to hear some examples of that. So organizations do have a responsibility to understand their exposure to the cyber risk if they're online, and understand what the potential consequences are. And often that's financial or operational loss, or indeed the big one is reputational loss. And I don't know if anybody's seen BBC News today, but there's actually a cracking little case study, and this shows you I like to prep right before these things. But there's a cracking little unfortunate case study about a business owner who's been attacked, and she'd built up her beauty products business for 12 years. And she was about to go on a lovely bank holiday weekend when she discovered that her online business had been cloned completely, and criminals had approached all their clients over that weekend as part of some apparent competition. And the purpose was to gain access to all the PayPal accounts. And she only got alerted to it by accident, not by design. And it was quite likely by the Monday morning that her complete business had been overtaken. And it's also quite clear that she hadn't really thought about this as being an opportunity, because there was no plan. She really didn't know what to do, where to go, and how to resolve that. And that's when an attack has happened, and it had never happened to her before. That's not the best time to start thinking, what do I do now? So planning is actually pretty critical to everybody. And that's why cyber incident management and cyber planning and cyber risk is relevant to business continuity, because it is part of that. And over the last few years, and I've certainly spoke to this audience in the past, I've been really trying to drive home that business continuity needs to link up much more with those in the organisation who may have responsibility for what's perceived to be the kind of cyber risk element. It often lies within the security sector, but actually this is just another business risk, and planning is key to that. And there are, so we need a plan for when it happens. And really importantly is there are solutions here. So the National Authority on Cybercrime, the National Cybersecurity Centre, provides an array of very readable guidance that's available to everybody for free. And some of these are technical mitigations. So, as I say, bad luck. It's not all bad luck, because in actual fact, it's a bit like being chased by a bear in the woods. You really only need to be faster than the guy behind you not to get caught. So there are things that you can do, and some of the technical mitigations that the NCSC product Cyber Essentials, which deals with the 5 critical technical controls that are proven to really defend you against the non-targeted online attacks. These things are quite basic and quite important, and they're very achievable for organizations. So we really need organizations to think if it's relevant for them to go there. Of course, that's quite a baseline step, but it's better than no step at all. And then there's an important other piece, and it's relevant to you guys, because it's on the preparation piece. So with the exception of the more mature organizations, say in finance and C&I, most organizations are really not getting themselves involved in any form of planning around cyber exercising. There is a will to do it, but for one reason or another, other things get in the way. And the NCSC has produced an excellent complete toolkit called Exercise in a Box that takes the most common attack scenarios and allows you to walk through these scenarios so that you understand how your organization may be impacted, and think through what you're going to do if and when that happens. It's such a good plan that the Scottish Government has funded a piece of work over the next 6 months, and we've got a delivery partner in to help facilitate and deliver this excellent tool, which is free, to organisations, at least 250 over the public, private and third sectors between September and April. And we actually have taster sessions on Zoom and Teams, because Zoom doesn't suit everybody, on 3 occasions later this month. And we will share the link to that, because these are free to attend events. And the scenarios, and one of them, funnily enough, is home-based working scenario, which is one of the new scenarios, are very much the kind of things that the non-technical people who are involved in business need to know about. So it will help understanding of the likelihood of that risk. So I said you can only manage the likelihood and impact of a risk if you begin to understand what that risk is. Well, that's exactly what Exercise in a Box does. So this will be a tiptoe into the world of cyber risks. And hopefully on the back of that, organizations will see that they can actually pick up and run with the Exercise tool that's free to them and make that part of their annual exercising. And we do exercise in other areas such as loss of power, flooding, and weather events. But this can happen at any time, and we need organizations to really step up to the plate on that. And I think that's all I really wanted to say to kind of set that scene, that cyber is real, is happening at pace. And more importantly, you have to have your eyes open to this as a risk and not dismiss it as a technical thing, because you'll know about it as this business owner did when it hits you, and it's business decisions that are critically required to be made, not technical ones. So we're happy to take questions later on, but I'm hoping that and I'm sure that the conversations you're about to hear from Jordan and David, who are both very much hands-on in this world, will help you understand some of the scale aspects and some of the things that you can practically do, because there's no point in just telling people you've got something to worry about. Actually, there's so much that you can do to make sure that your organization is ahead of the guy who's getting chased behind you by that big bear. And that might just be enough. We'd like it to be more, but you know, if it means you're surviving, that's fine.
Thank you, Keith. Some really useful thoughts there, and my scribble pad is already becoming quite congested. I might need a bigger pad or a new sheet. But some interesting thoughts and ideas there straight away. I should have asked before we started who was second on, whether it's Jordan or Dave. Is there a preference? No, neither of you nodding. I can't hear.
Yeah, David.
Yeah. Okay. In which case, you have the floor, David.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm just going to load up a presentation for everyone to see. Okay. Brilliant. So can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Brilliant. So thanks a lot for today again. What I wanted to do, so Jordan and myself had a quick discussion, and I'm going to set the scene in terms of what we're seeing out there from current attacks, mainly through giving you a walkthrough of a real life ransomware attack that we responded to through our incident response capability. So that's my side. Jordan's going to go through more of what you guys can do about it, and I'll chip in as appropriate. So as a bit of a scene setter, so this is just who am I slide. I've basically been in technical security for over 22 years now, and I've held roles within both public and private sector. I used to run penetration testing programs for the Ministry of Defence. I ran the security testing team and incident response function for the Royal Bank of Scotland group as well, before 10 years ago setting up 7 Elements, which is a Scottish-based cyber security consultancy where we focus on penetration testing. We're a CREST accredited company for the delivery of that, and we also deliver incident response capability based on our attack-led knowledge that we gain through attacking systems on a day-to-day basis. And finally, we also deliver a managed vulnerability scanning service called Clarus, which I'm glad to say that this week we've just had the news that we've been shortlisted for the Cyber Innovation Award for the Digital Tech Award 2020. So I'm quite chuffed with the team for that, and we've got that to look forward to next month as part of Scotsoft. That's probably enough about me. Today I'm just going to run through a quick introduction, which is where we are today, the cyber threat landscape, and then some complex ransomware attack as a point in case. Everything I'm going to talk about is based on real world incidents, so please note that it is something that we've actually investigated and has happened in Scotland. It's not theoretical, and I think that's quite key to sort of understand what's going on in the world. So to move on quickly, I just want to have a quick primer on the what I see as the threat landscape from our perspective, and this is very much through the prism of actors and their capability and their intent. So this pyramid represents a volume and capability view of the world. So at the bottom, huge volume of people can play in this space, but the technical ability is very low. So obviously we see it right at the bottom of that, we see worms, viruses, and automated attacks, which make up the majority of what we see on the internet. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this slide because I've talked about it before at various talks. But as we move up the pyramid, the technical ability is gaining, and therefore the attacks are more complex. They're more likely to be using code that hasn't been disclosed elsewhere, so they have a high degree of likelihood of being effective within your organization because there won't be a patch known about them. And what we tend to find, and this is very broad brush because everybody is motivated individually based on what they're trying to achieve, but the further down the spectrum, the script kiddies and the automated attacks are very opportunistic in nature. So they're looking for a flaw in technology to exploit. And then when they've gained that access, they then look to see what they can do with it. It's not generally a targeted attack, but as we move up the skills capability, the attacks do become more targeted, and they're more driven by a particular outcome that they're trying to desire. And certainly in the targeted and highly skilled category, this is where we're talking about organized crime or nation state actors, where they have a preset objective that they're going after at that point. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight from this landscape is that if you're further up the chain in terms of your technical capability, you can do anything that's below that skill level. So you can, if you need to, you can just drop automated attacks onto an environment, or attacks that a script kiddie that is only using code that they've taken from exploit proof of concepts. They can use those, and they will, because they'll always take the path of least resistance to achieve their objectives. However, they will also have very complex and niche attack methods that they alone know at the higher level as well. So that's something to be aware of, that and that's why we patch, because obviously that's moving the barrier up. In terms of today's example that we're going to walk through on the next
David, can I just interrupt for a second, just so that you're aware? Some people are having difficulty seeing the slides because of the different routes that they've taken to get to the teams. So if while you're looking at, or you're using the slides, if you can be as descriptive about them as you can, just for those that can't actually see them, that would be appreciated.
No worries.
And conscious that may be an issue for later, Jordan, I don't know whether while David's doing his bit, you could email them to your slides to Roger to see whether we can get copies circulated to attendees, but we'll continue with that in the background, David. Just so that you're aware.
I will say on the next page is literally a timeline which we step through, so I'll be describing that in quite a lot of detail anyway, so there's no drama. The importance on this slide was the fact that if you imagine a pyramid, and at the apex of the pyramid is where you have your most complicated attacks being generated, what we would normally refer to as zero-day attacks. But however, the population of people that have access to those, can create those and use those, is very limited. Whereas at the base of the pyramid, which is obviously the big fat end of the pyramid, that is the least amount of technical knowledge that you would require to play within this environment. And that's where we find worms, viruses, and automated attacks. And they are more opportunistic in nature and going after technology flaws. I think that's probably the best way of viewing that. But as I said, since this is being recorded, people will be able to see the slide later on. So what I wanted to do is walk through a ransomware attack, and this is an organized crime level of actor. They have a particularly high level of skill, and they have a very clear goal in terms of trying to extort money out of the targeted organization. Now, before we start going through the timeline, The organisation that was impacted is quite a large client in the retail sector. They have multiple sites across the region and distributed office and warehouse network across various sites. Their head of IT was made aware of an issue at 4 o'clock in the morning on the 27th of February, when systems started falling over, and they were called to find out what was going on. And that was their first understanding there was an impact on their business, and they very quickly worked out that they had a ransomware attack because there were files that were being encrypted across their entire estate, and they were losing access to all of their data. We were then brought in to help them understand how wide the attack was, what access they still had, what had been lost, and what the actors had been doing. So we conducted our investigation, and the timeline we now know post-incident was built up over a number of days of our activity. So we'll talk through a very sensible timeline now with all the facts laid out in chronological order, but clearly at the time we were piecing this together in real time. So the first thing, we were able to identify the initial compromise route into this organization, and it was a workstation that was dedicated to invoice payments within the organization, and it was compromised on the 13th of February at 2 minutes to 9 in the evening. And the reason it was compromised at that time is they had an automated processing system that would read inbound emails and open attached invoices and send them as print jobs to a printer within the organization. Now, the problem with that was that any document that matched certain extensions as a Word document or a PDF was automatically opened by a piece of software. Unfortunately, one of the emails that was sent in contained a malware-based Word document that was triggering further downloads of malware onto the device. And because it was automatically opened, it triggered the malware. Now, you've probably seen in the press and briefings on this, but it was the Emotet and TrickBot malware families that have been combined together for functionality. So each brings a different set of tools to the environment, and together they're a very robust malicious payload that actors can use to persist access within an environment. So at 2 minutes to 9, the first set of malware was dropped onto that workstation. That then downloaded further malware components to maintain control of that machine, and then tools were then downloaded to that workstation, which allowed the malicious actors to scan the internal network. And on the 13th to the 26th, so for a period of 13 days, the malicious actors undertook a period of network enumeration for the environment that they've gained access to. Now, during that period of time, they're scanning the network, their tools to identify other live machines within the environment. They also had tools to extract sensitive information, such as passwords, and send them back out of the environment. And it also looked to identify any commercially sensitive information that could be useful for the malicious actor. And we were able to identify between the 13th and 20th of February a number of exfiltration of data was undertaken by the malicious actors, which gave them quite a lot of sensitive information about how the business worked, their invoicing, their customer base. And we actually saw on the 16th of February emails being sent to customers and partners of that organization using the information that had been stolen during the earlier period of the network enumeration, and they were attempting to do very highly targeted phishing attacks against other organizations to try and gain access to those entities as well. So we saw direct use of the data that they were sending out for themselves. Clearly, there's a point there just to raise that part of our assessment was on the type of data that was exfiltrated, because there was a question around the requirement of ICO reporting under GDPR. Thankfully for this organization, we were able to assess that all of the data that was exfiltrated was business to business related. There was no personal information that was being exfiltrated, and therefore under a pure GDPR view of an ICO reporting requirement, there wasn't a need to go and talk to the ICO about loss of personal data, which is obviously was a useful juncture in the investigation for the organisation in question. But more interestingly, so we haven't even got to the 27th of February at this point. So we're still in a period of the malicious actors have gained access to the environment. They're using the information that they've exfiltrated to affect other compromises on other end organisations, but they're also taking the information they've gained to build up a picture of the internal network. They extracted passwords and some administrator passwords out of the machines that they were compromising, and they started using that to move around the internal network. And we saw a lot of remote desktop protocol activity where they were using the credentials they'd stolen to move from one machine to another machine to understand what they'd gained access to. And over a period of 14 days, they'd covered the entire internal network. They'd identified all of the server estate, where the sensitive information was, where the backups were kept. And then at 8 o'clock in the evening on the 27th of February, is when they moved into the ransomware phase, where they dropped the encryptors in a coordinated fashion across all of the boxes that they'd compromised on the internal network. And that encompassed end workstations, as well as the servers that they'd moved through as well. And all of the backup regime was compromised as well. So the organization was left with no usable route to recovering data at this stage. So as you can see from that, there was a good 2 weeks of lead up to the ransomware being deployed into the environment, where a number of triggers could have been potentially spotted to say that there was an ongoing compromise. And whilst there would have been data exfiltration and collateral damage in terms of the emails being sent to their partners, if it had been spotted at an earlier stage, it would have been less of an impact than losing all of their data internally. In discussing it with the organization, we helped identify some files that were recoverable, and one of those files was a key database file that allowed the business to continue. They had pointed out that had they not been able to get that file back and use it, they were 2 days away from the organization ceasing any form of trade and would have probably collapsed at that point. So it was a very close run thing in terms of their survivability from this attack. Thankfully, through the investigation, as I said, we identified some key files that they were able to use, but also remove the access to the environment from the malicious actors and allow them to recover. But as I said, it's the key ones here is that there is a lead in time to these complex attacks being deployed, and a lot of activity that's going on in your internal network. And we've seen on other cases where malicious actors have gained RDP access to servers from outside of the organization, and they've been on the internal environment for at least 30 days before they deploy any ransomware. And this type of investigation sort of goes a long way to help understand what it is that is going on during that quiet period. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover from my slides. It was purely saying that there is there's a lot of activity that goes on. Malicious actors will take data incrementally as they're inside the network, because they never know when they're going to be potentially found and kicked out. And they will probably maintain a number of routes in to allow them to drop the ransomware at the point that's effective for them to do so. And when they do drop that in these types of cases, they're doing it in a very systematic and full approach that allows them to pretty much ensure that if you want your data back, you highly likely to have to go and pay the ransom. Thankfully for the organisation we worked with, no ransom was paid, and we certainly wouldn't ever recommend that people do make those payments. But clearly that's a business decision for the business at the time, based on the risk that they're facing. So that's my talk very briefly in terms of a current attack that we've investigated.
David, thank you very much. You've now, between the two of you so far, you've succeeded in scaring us all witless, especially as a small business owner. Thank you very much. So hopefully I'm turning to Jordan and he's going to tell me that all is not doom and gloom, and that there is some key things that we can do to defeat this. Jordan, over to you.
Thank you. No, we're all going to die. There's
a Friday. Look forward. Thanks.
it's not, it's serious, right? It's serious, but it's not doom, right? It is very serious, but it is not doom. And let me talk about, we've heard a lot of technical jargon and a lot of technical terms in here. And I want to talk to, business continuity professionals and executives and leaders about what to do and how you can approach things, because the remedies are in part technical, but they are mostly non-technical, and they are things that you can do. And so I want to provide that hope, because there are some gaps, and I'm very excited to talk to all of you today because of this, because those gaps can be filled with solid business continuity principles. So let me talk about what that looks like. All right, can we see the screen? All right, so thank you. My name is Jordan Schroeder. I'm the Managing Chief Information Security Officer at Hephaestus, pronounced like the Greek god of the forge. And we serve both universities and colleges and public sector as well for security and security guidance, as well as data protection and other shared services that we provide to members. And my experience with business continuity and my my first real baptism by fire in business continuity was in Vancouver, British Columbia. And Vancouver is a city that's basically an island that's connected to the mainland through marsh. And it is also in a very seismically active area, which means we're just waiting for the big one to come and level the city. And the city went through an exercise where it wanted everybody living on within the city proper to go through a robust business continuity exercise, with the understanding that I have a picture on the slide of the city. It's making me homesick. And the number of skyscrapers that Vancouver has. And the understanding is that the expectation was that if the big one hit, 1/3 of all of those buildings would topple. So how could businesses continue? How could life continue? And so I was part of this exercise in how to do this. And I learned an awful lot. And one of the things in applying these lessons to cybersecurity and information security is the difference between geological change. And for business continuity experts, we're familiar with earthquakes and floods and fires and storms and even market forces, which can come in and disrupt the business and provide problems that we need to anticipate. And those problems tend to be fairly predictable. The trends can be observed over time, and we can adjust our approaches and our strategies based on observing these trends. Because although things change, I mean, we've changes in climate, we have changes in marketplace, which happen, and they seem rather fast, but in the scheme of things, they're slow enough for us to react, right? And even with the pandemic, I worked with the public health organization, the public health department in the province of Saskatchewan 15 years ago, where the public health people had predicted that the world was due for a global pandemic. And that was 15 years ago. And they were trying to prepare the province for what would happen if half of the people got sick and couldn't come to work or were flooding the hospitals. And this was 15 years ago that public health professionals were anticipating something like COVID-19. And when things like SARS came up and bird flu, I was asking my public health people, is this the big one? Is this what we've been preparing for? And they shook their heads and said, no, these are just small blips. We're still waiting for the big one. And even as pandemics and public health issues and geological and climate forces work, we can adjust to them. And we have those resources and those processes to do that. When it comes to the internet change and threats to the business and threats to process continuity happens at the speed of the internet. Things change, and Keith was talking about this, that the threats, the people that are a threat to our business and threat to our organizations, they understand and can adapt to new opportunities and new technologies faster than we can. So we can see even every 2 months a change and a shift in how things are changing. And we can be completely surprised by things out of the blue for what happens and things that can affect our organizations. And David talked about ransomware, which is a huge disruption because every file within a system becomes completely unavailable. It's essentially removed from the system. But we're also talking about DDoS, which you may have heard, which is a flood of traffic on the internet, which completely shuts down your ability to function on the internet. And just like a water flood, DDoS is just as impactful, but it's completely unpredictable. With a flood, you have water tables you can consult, you have history you can consult. With a DDoS flood, with an internet flood, you have no ability to predict. It is completely up to the whim of the attacker when, where, how, and how big that attack is going to come. So as a business continuity professional, what you have to be able to accept is some loss of control and some loss of predictive ability. And developing the ability to adjust your business continuity plans in the moment, on the fly, and having those resources to do that. And I have 3 things that I'd like to present to you that you can do, which are completely non-technical, but are sorely needed for any type of business continuity exercise when dealing with information security or cybersecurity. The first is tabletop exercises. And Keith talked about the exercise in a box from the NCSE and the SBRC's recent appointment to be able to facilitate these within organizations in Scotland. And that's fantastic. And as business continuity professionals, we know that tabletop exercises are good and they are very, very useful, especially for these big events, floods, fires, even pandemics. What I recommend in terms of tabletop exercises is doing them frequently. With our members, we do tabletop exercises monthly with different scenarios, and we even revisit old scenarios with twists, because that's how often things change. That's how often we need to make sure that we're training and retraining and reviewing these steps with our people. And I don't just do tabletop exercises with the technical folks. I will bring in management, executives, and other side people that might not be directly affected, but some of these other people like marketing, communications, and these other types of people that are very, very important whenever there's a disruption. Because as you've probably experienced with any type of tabletop exercise, the broader your perspectives at the table, the broader the experience that comes to the table, the more prepared we can get. And if we leave the tabletop exercises just to the technical folks, we're going to get a very narrow view of how to prepare and how to recover the organization after an attack. So I like to bring in as broad a perspective set as possible whenever dealing with tabletop exercises. I've even brought in janitorial staff in dealing with some of these big tabletop scenarios like ransomware that has flooded the entire organization and locked up all the files. Because I've experienced it. I did it as a whim once, and the janitorial staff started talking about the changes in the patterns and how people move around the building, and all the offices and the areas that they have to unlock when people need access to the equipment. And that provided some very interesting insight, and it uncovered the fact that the janitorial staff was actually violating various secure policies because it was a big accident and a big emergency, and suddenly they needed the janitorial staff keys to unlock everything to some random unauthorized people just to be able to work. So bringing in this broad experience, even the janitorial staff, is vital to preparing the organization and also uncovering the gaps. And tabletop exercises is not an audit exercise to know whether or not everyone understands the policies and the procedures. a tabletop exercise is a way of uncovering those gaps, those weak areas. What don't we know? What haven't we uncovered yet that we need to know in case we need to know it later on? Because trying to figure things out in the moment is going to be a disaster. Now, one of my favorite stories that I bring up is we had done a tabletop exercise and a business continuity exercise with an insurance company. And I was one of the IT administrators at the time, and we decided, and senior executives signed off on the idea that email could go down for 2 hours. And that was an acceptable outage for the email system. We were really dependent on the email system to do business, but we figured this would be all right. Now, we had a problem with the email system, and it went down. It went down for 20 minutes. This was very noticeable in the organization. And so emails were flying around. Managers were getting all grumpy and getting furrowed brows. And I was the IT administrator responsible for trying to bring the email system back up. At one point, about a half hour in, the CEO of the company was standing beside my desk, and he was asking, when's the server going to be up? When's email coming back? When's email coming back? And I'm looking at him and saying, we agreed that this would be a 2-hour outage, and I'm still in my investigation phase. Why are you here? So when it comes to tabletop exercises and when it comes to business continuity plans, this exercises help gauge the expectations, because it's one thing to put on paper that an outage for 2 hours is fine. It's very different when it's actually happening and everybody gets nervous. So these exercises help to set these expectations as well. The second thing that I would recommend that business continuity professionals can do to really help an organization recover and prepare for a cyber incident is pure problem management. Now, I've started research, and it started off as a LinkedIn poll, but it's now grown beyond this, and the numbers are fairly consistent. I asked whether or not cybersecurity departments in organizations in UK, Europe, Canada, and the US, whether or not they engage in problem management. And by problem management, I mean looking at your incidents from a meta view in aggregate, looking for commonalities of problems that need to be addressed. So far, my results are 80% of organizations don't. That is huge, and that's a problem, because it means that, as you know, small leaks can turn into big floods. And if we have little leaks of water all over the building, they come together and they aggregate and they cause a problem. And it's the same thing with cybersecurity and information security. These small problems that pop up might seem like annoyances, but they might also be an indication of bigger, deeper, more foundational problems that we need to address. And as business continuity professionals, this is where you can shine. This is really where you can bring in your expertise and guide cybersecurity departments and IT professionals through this process to make sure that this is being done so that we can get ahead of problems that we already know about that we just haven't looked at yet. So this is really, really important, and I encourage problem management for cybersecurity and IT departments to do this, and business continuity professionals are very well placed to lead in this particular area. The third thing that I recognize, and the screen I have, the picture I have on the screen, I love this picture. One of the things that business continuity professionals and departments can provide in a cyber incident is calm in complexity. Now, David was talking about some of this, but what a lot of people don't realize, well, especially what a lot of non-technical, non-IPT people just don't realize, is how jerry-rigged all technology is. There is, even with a simple email system, it used to be one system, one machine that did one job. Now, your typical email system is duct tape technology from a dozen different places that all interact together and email flows through. I worked with a professor from MIT who was consulting with NASA and the US Navy on why NASA and the US Navy were experiencing so many different problems with information security and breakdowns and basically business continuity. And she had done an analysis, and she's come to a conclusion that I like to to announce and like to say a lot louder, which is that IT administrators no longer own or administrate information technology systems. They merely oversee them. Your basic IT system is so complex and so interrelated and with so many unknown elements that no administrator, no operator of these systems actually knows what's going on from beginning to end. They understand it conceptually. They understand how it basically all works. But too often, one small change in one area can break the entire thing. So from a more traditional business continuity perspective, this is a highly complex thing, a highly complex machine that the business is dependent upon and is crucial for the running of the organization. But we don't know, and more than that, it is constantly evolving. So as new patches come in, as new technology comes in, as new functionality comes into each of these systems, it adds another layer of complexity. It adds a new wire connection. It adds more duct tape to the entire thing to make it work. So as business continuity professionals, I encourage the leadership of calm, because one of the things that I've experienced, and my story about the email system going down, the CEO at my desk, is that there's an expectation that IT people know and understand how systems work. And when things fail, it's the usual expectation is that the IT person has done something wrong, or the IT person should have known or could have predicted. And the hidden secret is we don't. We can't know, we can't predict. Yes, there are some things we can, but in the large part, we can't. So when things break and when things happen that are unpredicted, blame is not helpful at all. And instead, what we need is an understanding and some leadership in accepting the state of things the way that they are and working to move things to where things are going. And so plans and exercises and all these types of things that I've talked about all lead to helping understand that things are going to break. Our threat actors, our attackers, our criminals outside, they are legion. Recent research showed that a computer is attacked on average 39 seconds, every 39 seconds. A computer that's on the internet is somehow attacked. They're not always successful, but the attack is always happening. So attackers are constant, they are legion, they are constantly attacking, and they're constantly reinventing how they attack. And so this is something that we're dealing with. And then the systems that we're relying on for our organizations are now so complex and so duct taped together that we can't rely on them all the time to do what we expect them to do. So I encourage you to now rethink how you would initiate business continuity processes with this complexity and uncertainty in mind, and then leading your organization, leading the executives, leading the IT, and leading the security people to be calm, accept the complexity and the uncertainty, and move forward with that as a base. Now, I was hoping my Teams has done something strange. I don't know how to end my... I don't know how to end this. This has opened up in a strange window. This has never happened to me before. Speaking of uncertainty and complexity of systems.
Is there anything we can help with, Jordan? What's the problem?
Are you seeing the slide on the screen?
The one that says the aftermath, yes.
Yes. I do not know how to end the PowerPoint presentation because it is opened within Teams and not within PowerPoint.
Okay.
So this is, oh, here we go. Stop presenting. There we go. There is a button that showed up. There we are.
Excellent. Excellent. Well done.
I use Teams every day, and I use Teams as my main contact with all members, and that's never happened to me before. I believe this is new functionality because I recently updated. This is a great object lesson for complexity and uncertainty.
Every day's a school day. Every day's a school day, definitely.
It's getting comfortable with uncertainty. I think that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As business continuity professionals, we have to realize that this is the state of things, and we expect that IT professionals and the IT departments keep things stable. They are very limited in their ability to do that. They work very hard to keep things stable and reliable, but it is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So thank you. Matthew, I will hand things over to you for the next point.
Great. Thank you very much. In which case, Roger, if we can just stop the recording part of this, that would be good, just so that as we go into questions, just in case there are any questions that are of a sensitive nature,